What chance does a woman alone have when 6 armed riders circle her wagon in the middle of the Montana prairie? The first gunshot cracked through the warm evening air as Tessa Nelson gripped the reins with shaking hands. The prairie stretched empty around her, the wind brushing through tall grass as if nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong. The sun was sinking behind the mountains, and she was trapped on the open trail with 6 riders closing in. It was 1878, and danger often waited for travelers, but she had prayed it would not wait for her. The leader pushed his horse closer, a sneer on his weathered face. "Hand over everything you got, lady. I'm not asking twice." Tessa's heart pounded hard enough to hurt. Everything she owned was inside that wagon. Her clothes, her mother's Bible, her sewing kit, and the small pouch of savings her father left her before he passed. At just 22, she was already alone in the world, headed to Helena to live with an aunt she barely knew. "I have nothing of value," she said, trying to sound brave. Her copper hair had fallen loose from its pins, brushing her cheeks each time the wind shifted. Another man edged his horse forward. "We'll decide what's valuable." Tessa tightened her hand near her skirt, reaching for the small derringer she kept hidden. Her father had given it to her before he died. "For protection," he'd said. She prayed she would not need it today. But before she could grab the weapon, a gunshot exploded from the rocks on her right. A bandit jerked backward, clutching his shoulder. His horse reared, nearly throwing him. The others spun around, trying to see where the shot came from. That was a warning. A deep voice shouted from behind the rocks. "The next one goes through someone's heart. Ride off now if you want to live." Tessa froze. The voice was calm and steady, like someone who had fired a gun many times before. The riders exchanged nervous looks. Another shot hit the dirt right in front of the leader's horse. The animal reared wildly. "I ain't dying for this," one man muttered. He turned and rode off. The others followed. Fast. Within seconds, they were nothing more than dust clouds fading across the prairie. For a long moment, Tessa sat still, gripping the reins so tightly her fingers hurt. Her breath came fast and uneven. She couldn't move, couldn't even think. Then she saw him. A tall man stepped out from behind the rocks with a rifle in hand. He walked toward her wagon with slow, steady steps. As he came closer, she caught sight of a dusty cowboy hat, a strong jaw, sun-darkened skin, and eyes so blue they reminded her of a summer sky. A badge glinted on his vest. He touched the brim of his hat politely. "Ma'am, Quincy Porter, Deputy Marshal out of Fort Benton. Looks like I showed up just when you needed help." Tessa finally found her voice. "Thank you, Deputy Porter. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here." "Nothing good," he said. His eyes scanned the horizon where the gang had vanished. "Those riders belong to the Hawkins gang. Nasty group. Been harassing travelers for months." He looked at her wagon. "You traveling alone?" "Yes, to Helena. My aunt lives there." Quote. Quincy frowned. "It's dangerous country for a woman traveling by herself. Those men may come back once they think I'm gone." He paused a moment, choosing his words. "I'm headed to Helena myself to deliver paperwork. If you'll allow it, I'd like to ride with you." Relief washed through her like cool water. "I would appreciate that, Deputy." "Call me Quincy," he said gently. "Seems we'll be traveling close for a bit. And please call me Tessa." By the time the sun dipped behind the mountains, Quincy had helped her set up camp. She told him she could manage her own fire, but he still checked everything twice. He insisted she sleep inside the wagon while he rested outside with his rifle beside him. That night, Tessa lay awake, listening to the soft night sounds. The prairie was quiet except for the rustle of grass and the distant howl of a coyote. She thought of the armed riders, the fear she felt, and the calm voice that had saved her. For the first time since her father died, she felt protected. What she did not know was that Quincy Porter lay awake too, staring up at the stars. He couldn't shake the image of Tessa's green eyes, or the steadiness in her voice when she faced the bandits. He had not expected to care about anyone again, not after losing his wife and child years ago. But something about the young woman in the wagon stirred something in him he had buried long ago. When morning came, he was already up, making coffee over a small fire. Tessa stepped down from the wagon, her hair pinned neatly again, her dress brushed off as best as she could manage. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she replied softly. "Thank you for everything." Quincy handed her a tin cup of coffee. "We should reach Elk Creek by nightfall. Safer place to rest." As they packed up camp and continued down the trail, Tessa felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. The morning sun rose over the Montana plains, warm and bright after the long and frightening day before. Tessa guided her wagon while Quincy rode beside her, his horse keeping an easy pace. The calm of the new day made it hard to believe that bandits had nearly ended her life only yesterday. They traveled quietly for a while. The prairie stretched in every direction, tall grass waving in the wind and the sound of Quincy's horse hooves steady beside the wagon. Every now and then, Tessa glanced at him, noticing details she hadn't seen when fear had clouded her vision. The scar along his jaw, the way his sandy hair curled slightly at the ends, the careful way he watched everything around them. "You've been a deputy for a long time?" she asked, wanting to break the silence. 5 years, he said. "Signed on after the war." "You fought?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Joined the Union Army at 16. Lied about my age. A lot of boys did." Tessa felt a weight settle in her chest. "My father served too." He didn't speak much about it. "Most don't," Quincy replied. They rode until midday, stopping by a small creek where the water was clear and cool. Quincy helped her unhitch the horses and check the wagon wheels. His movements were calm and practiced, and Tessa felt comforted by his presence. As they ate a simple meal of bread and dried apples, she noticed him studying her dress. "You sew that yourself?" he asked. Tessa nodded. "I've been sewing since I was 12. I want to open a dress shop in Helena." "A dress shop?" He smiled. "You've got a talent. I can see that." The praise warmed her cheeks. "Thank you. I hope the ladies there will like my work." "I think they will," he said with quiet confidence. After their break, they continued toward Elk Creek. The trail was long, but they weren't alone for long. Quincy suddenly lifted his hand, signaling Tessa to stop. "What is it?" she whispered, fear rising again. "Dust up ahead," he murmured. "Someone's there." Her heart thumped as she reached for the small derringer hidden in her sleeve. Quincy gave her a steady look. "Stay in the wagon. If I signal, turn back fast. Understand?" "Yes," she whispered. He rode ahead slowly, rifle resting across his saddle. Tessa watched with breath trapped in her chest as he approached the cottonwood trees. Moments later, another wagon appeared. A buckboard driven by an older man with white hair and a tooth-missing grin. "Miss Nelson," Quincy called. "This here is Ezra Johnson. He's just had trouble with a wagon wheel." Ezra tipped his battered hat. "Deputy helped me fix it. Heard you ran into the Hawkins gang yesterday. Nasty bunch." Tessa relaxed slightly, grateful it wasn't more danger. They decided to travel together. Ezra took the lead. Tessa's wagon followed, and Quincy rode behind them, keeping watch. Ezra talked so much that Tessa found herself laughing at his funny stories about buffalo hunts, early gold rush days, and frontier troubles. Now and then she glanced back at Quincy, who stayed focused on the trail, though she caught a small smile tugging at his lips when Ezra's stories got wild. By sunset, Elk Creek came into view. A way station stood near the water, with a stable, a corral, and a few cabins. Inside, warmth and stew filled the air. Travelers sat at long tables, sharing meals. Tessa felt safe for the first time in days. After supper, Quincy walked her to the small cabin behind the station. The night sky was clear and full of stars. Tessa felt the cold air on her cheeks as they reached her door. "Thank you for today," she said softly. "I don't know what I'd do if you weren't here." "You'd manage," he said. "You're stronger than you think." A silence fell between them, not awkward, but full of thoughts neither said out loud. Tessa lifted her eyes to his. "Have you been alone long?" He hesitated. 7 years. Lost my wife and son in childbirth. After that, I took the badge. It kept me moving." Tessa's heart ached for him. "I'm sorry." He nodded, accepting her sympathy without flinching. "Life keeps going." You find a way. She looked at him gently. You've helped so many people. You helped me. His voice softened. I'm glad I was there. The silence changed then, warmer somehow. Tessa felt her heart beating faster, though she didn't fully understand why. Well? Quincy said quietly, stepping back. Rest now. We've got another long day tomorrow. Quote, Good night, Quincy. Good night, Tessa. She closed the cabin door and leaned against it, breath unsteady. She barely knew him. Yet something about him, his steady voice, his quiet strength, the sadness in his eyes, pulled at her in a way she couldn't explain. Outside, Quincy stood staring at the closed door longer than he meant to. Something had changed between them, something he had not expected, something he was afraid to name. He finally turned toward the dark yard, but the thought stayed with him. He didn't want this journey to end. The next morning began with a soft golden sunrise spreading across Elk Creek. Tessa stepped out of her cabin to find Quincy already saddling his horse, his movements calm and steady as always. He looked up when he heard her footsteps. Morning, he said, tipping his hat. Morning, she replied, feeling that familiar warmth in her chest. Ezra joined them soon after, looking a bit worn from the previous night's whiskey. Together, the small group set out toward Helena. The trail was smoother than before, and the land slowly shifted from open prairie to rolling hills dotted with pine trees. For a while, they traveled quietly. Tessa found herself stealing glances at Quincy more often than she wanted to admit. She noticed how he scanned the land as if danger could rise from any shadow. His presence made her feel safe in a way she hadn't felt since her father passed. By midday, they stopped at a stream to rest the horses. Tessa washed her hands in the cool water, watching sunlight shimmer on the surface. You'll like Helena, Quincy said as he sat on a nearby rock. Town's growing fast. Good place for someone starting fresh. I hope so, Tessa said. I just want to build a life, something stable, something good. You will, he said with quiet confidence. You've got determination. The words made her smile. Thank you. That means more than you know. Ezra returned from gathering firewood and began telling another one of his loud, unbelievable stories. Quincy listened with amusement while Tessa laughed, the sound light and free. The day passed peacefully until dark clouds began rising behind them. The wind changed, carrying the scent of a storm. We need shelter, Quincy said firmly. Storm's coming fast. Rain hit before they reached the roadhouse at Ruby Creek. Lightning flashed across the sky as Quincy helped Tessa down from the wagon, his hand steadying her when the wind nearly pushed her off balance. Inside the roadhouse, travelers gathered around the fire. They ate hot stew and fresh bread and shared stories as the storm raged outside. Later that night, when the travelers settled into their rooms, Quincy walked Tessa to the small cabin she'd been given. The rain had slowed, leaving the world quiet and cool. Thank you again, Tessa said softly, for staying with me for everything. He looked at her for a long moment, his blue eyes steady. I'm only doing what's right. You shouldn't have been on that trail alone. But you didn't have to help me, she whispered. You could have kept riding. Quincy's voice lowered. I couldn't have left you there. Quote. A silence stretched between them, soft and full of something neither had the courage to say. Good night, Tessa, he said quietly. Good night, Quincy. The next day dawned clear. After hours of traveling through the foothills, they finally crested a hill overlooking a wide valley. Helena spread below them. Busy streets, rising buildings, smoke drifting from chimneys. It looked alive, full of promise. Tessa gasped. It's beautiful. Welcome to Helena, Quincy said with a small smile. As they rode into town, people greeted Quincy with nods of respect. He guided Tessa toward Wilson's General Goods, where her aunt lived. Her aunt rushed out the moment they arrived. Oh, Tessa, my dear girl. Tessa fell into her arms, relief flooding through her. She introduced Quincy and Ezra, explaining how Quincy had saved her from bandits. Her aunt thanked him warmly and invited him inside. After a hearty meal, Quincy stood and placed his hat back on his head. I should report to the marshal, he said, but his voice softened. I'll call tomorrow evening if that's all right. Quote. Tessa felt her heart lift. Tomorrow would be perfect. He paused at the doorway. I'm glad you made it here safe." "Because of you," she said. For a moment, neither moved. Then Quincy gave her the smallest, warmest smile, the kind that said more than words, and stepped out into the Helena street. Tessa watched him go, feeling something she had not felt in a very long time: hope, possibility, and a connection she could not ignore. Their journey together had ended, but something new had begun, a fragile, unspoken promise that tomorrow could bring more. And Tessa found herself waiting for tomorrow, with a full heart and trembling hands.